All righty, we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Sports to Suits, where weekly I highlight former athletes that have not only done incredible things in the athletic community, but are also doing amazing things in the business community. And I have to say, this week I'm fangirling just a little bit. I have a gymnastics icon on the line with me. We've got John Roethlisberger. John, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
And I know you're usually doing the broadcasting, so we'll dive a little bit into that. So I'm excited
Okay.
to dive into the business side with you because I'm sure that you probably discuss just the sport a lot, not
Very
necessarily the
true.
business side.
Very true. Yeah.
Well, as you guys are all popping in, definitely let us know where you're calling from or where you're tuning in from. Would love to see where you guys are listening. We've got people all over the world that tune into this show, so it's always exciting for me to see where people are popping in. And I guess I'll do a quick intro. So John is a 3-time Olympic gymnast, 4-time national champion, and the accolades just go on and on and on. Is there anything else I need to add to that,
A
John?
father of three. I mean, that's kind of my biggest accomplishment, probably having three little boys.
Oh my goodness. And I kind of know a little bit about your story, but I would love for other people to hear, how did you get into gymnastics?
Yeah. So gymnastics runs in my family, to say the least. So you can see this old picture behind me. My grandparents used to be gymnasts and part of the Swiss Turners way back in the mid 1900s, and so it started with them. It's kind of the Swiss background, and my dad was a gymnast, and he did quite well. Made the 1968 Olympic team. Was my coach for 33 years at the University of Minnesota. Um, and my sister was also a gymnast, and she was a member of the 1984 Olympic team that competed in Los Angeles. So, needless to say, it was a family pastime. We would do hand balancing stuff in the yard, and going to work with your parents for me meant going to the gym, right? How many kids have gone to work with their parents over the years? And I just got to go to the greatest playground in the world, a gymnastics gym. And that's kind of how I started. I just played it. I wasn't thinking I was going to be an Olympian someday, at an early age. I just kind of did it. And my dad had kind of had this philosophy of, you don't have to do gymnastics, but you have to do something. You're not going to come home and sit on your butt, and you're gonna pick something. It could be music, it could be anything you want it to be, but you're gonna find something you like to do, and you're gonna work at it. And it just happened to be after trying soccer and baseball, which quite frankly at fifth, sixth grade level is a lot easier to do than gymnastics is. And those were fun,
Agree.
but I kind of gravitated towards gymnastics at some point, and then really around middle school, high school is when I got serious about it and thought, okay, I want to see how far I can take this. And I was very fortunate to have a long career.
So I want to dive into, because once again, your gymnastics career is super impressive, but your business career is equally as impressive. So I had a couple questions pop in, and one of them kind of gets this conversation flowing. So Dina asked, what process did you use to move your passion from sports into business? Because you're in, like, talk a little bit about just your business career.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's so weird that I don't actually even think of myself as a businessman, which is odd. I do own a business with my teammate from the '96 Olympics, John McCready. Our primary business has always been our summer camp. It's called Flip Fest. It's in Crossville, Tennessee, right in between Knoxville and Nashville, and we host about 260 kids a week for 10 weeks of summer camp every year, and it's mayhem and awesome all at the same time. And we do retreats in the off season. Different events come in, whether it's church groups or gymnastic camps or corporate retreats, and they use our facility. So that's our main business. Since then, we've gotten involved in some other real estate ventures together. But to go back to her question is, how do you take your passion and turn it into a business? I think you find what you're passionate about, and then you just see kind of where it takes you. I mean, everyone says find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And it's the greatest cliche ever, right? But I struggled a little bit, as every athlete. What am I going to do? I got a business degree from the University of Minnesota. I thought I was going to be an international businessman, and I took foreign language, and then I graduated, and my last round at the Olympics finished, and I had a friend who was involved in real estate in Minnesota, and thought, oh, maybe this will be what I do, and I liked it, but it's hard
Well,
to
you
find
got your
that thing.
license, right? Like you went and got your real estate license.
Yeah, I got my real estate license. I was kind of just following his footsteps because he's very successful. And then John McCready started talking to me about the summer camp he got involved with in Knoxville. And we started talking more and said, why don't we have a summer camp? And I thought, now that's an idea. Because I always used to love to go to summer camp. I loved, Lake Owen was nearby where I lived. IGC, which is in Pennsylvania, is another big summer camp. And I'd go there and go, man, I look around, this would be an incredible way to make a living. You don't have to go to an office every day. It's always something different. It's fun. There's kids involved. And so he brought it up and it just planted that seed. And I'm like, this is what I need to do. And I think you got to find something that you're passionate about. I think a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people go to college and you're 18. I don't know what I want to do at 18 yet. You're expected to figure out your major and graduate in 4 years, right? So you make a decision. My wife brought this up the other day. She goes, I went to UT, University of Tennessee, and I was going to be pre-med. I took all the pre-med prereqs. And then she realized I don't want to be a doctor. And so she told me, I didn't know this. This was just the other day. She said, I opened up the UT catalog, or I don't know what you want to call it. It's like about UT and has all their curriculum. And she goes, I just started flipping through until I found something that I thought looked cool. And I'm like, okay. And then she did her due diligence. She became a speech pathologist. She went and shadowed the speech pathology department at UT. But it's funny because that determines the direction of your life, like looking through a catalog, right? But I think the lesson for me was that keep looking through and what you find, keep looking, and don't feel like, hey, if I don't graduate and get a job by the time I'm 23, my life's a failure. Now, granted, you don't want to just sit there and pile up college debt, right? But at the same time, this is the rest of your life. Find your passion and then find the business, I think, is what I was very fortunate to have. But I think people should take more time to do that. Don't be in a rush. Don't worry about trying and failing a couple of times until you find out exactly what you want to do.
So you kind of nailed it a little bit when you were talking just a second ago about the transition out of sports. So this is a really, really difficult thing for like 99.9% of athletes. I dealt with it when I was a super young kid, but you just mentioned it too. And I think it's super common. Like, tell me a little bit about, so when you left college and when you stopped doing gymnastics professionally, how was that transition out of the sport for you?
Well, it's hard. I think it's been harder for other athletes. It can be harder than it was for me, is what I'm trying to say. But it's still hard because there's this illusion that, I want to find something that empowers me, or I'm as passionate about as doing gymnastics and competing gymnastics, or competing football, or competing baseball, whatever it might be. You're not going to find it. It not in the same way that you had for your sport. You can find it, but it channels through your body and through your mind in a different way. In fact, it channels a lot less through your body because you don't use your body the same way you did when you were a full-time athlete, whether you were a high school athlete, college athlete, Olympian, whatever it might be. So I think it's a mistake to try to replicate exactly that feeling that you had. And you always, again, regardless of the level of athlete you were, you always had some notoriety because you did it, right? Your friends maybe it's just your friend. Oh, you're a gymnast. Wow, that's cool. And it made you feel good, right? And maybe you're on a high school team and you're like, oh, wow, I saw you compete last weekend in the high school meet or club meet or college or whatever it might be. No matter what the level, you have this identification of, I'm a gymnast. I'm Amanda Banks. Oh yeah, what? Tell me about you. I'm a gymnast, right?
That's how you respond. I mean, and for you went through that. Even like your whole family was full of gymnastics. So at the dinner table, I'm sure that y'all are talking gymnastics, and in the yard, you're doing the handstands that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so you go from that identity to going, okay, I'm going to be a realtor. Not that I didn't enjoy that, but you have to have this shift of, all right, what about this excites me? How can I? Yeah, and I think for athletes, you want to compete, right? you want to compete. I want to be the best realtor in the state of Minnesota. I want to be the best at real estate development. And, I want to be really good at this. Well, you'll never know because there's no medal at the end. There's no coach giving you feedback saying, man, that was a really good job you did on that. Or, maybe a little bit here and there, but it's a different environment. And I think there's a lack of mentorship in particular when athletes, especially athletes that have done it as a career, even if you've done it through college, full time. I think there's a lack of mentorship and people coming in and going, hey, you're graduating next year from college. You're going to be done playing the sport. What are you going to do next? And I think it's important to think about that ahead of time. And also it's important for those that have done it to go back and go, hey, if you're interested in running a summer camp, I'd be happy to mentor you or show you what it's like, or you want to be a speech pathologist or whatever. I think that piece of it is really missing in our society because there's people who have done things and then there's a whole generation of people coming up that want to do things and they need some guidance. And I think mentorship is can be a huge thing. And certainly I was fortunate. I had a little bit of it from a friend of mine and different things, but it's a challenge. It's hard.
So let's talk about, tell me the story about you going from real estate into owning this gymnastics camp. Because a lot of people probably see Flip Fest as this highly successful camp, but it didn't happen overnight, right?
Yeah, no.
It took, I'm sure, a ton of work. So talk a little bit about that story of going from realtor to now business owner.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to do the real estate in Minnesota before this happened. So it wasn't like I was making a living off it. I was still dabbling in different gymnastics related things. So to leave that behind wasn't really, oh my gosh, am I really going to make this switch? It was more like I was still trying to find my way. So to go from that to the gymnastic camp, though, it was still a big leap. I mean, if anybody knows John and I, a high business IQ is not the first thing you would think of when you meet us. You're like, these guys run any kind of business? That shocks me. And if you followed our path to the point of where we have a successful gymnastic camp, you probably would have been like, wow, that is not what I expected. I was in Minnesota and John and I had been talking about the camp, and we did everything from getting maps out to see how much of the country was within, a 5-hour drive of Crossville, Tennessee, or Knoxville, Tennessee at the time. And
why Knoxville or Crossville?
Well, that's a pretty good story too, actually. John got invited to a camp in Knoxville that was out of a gym club. And Amanda, you as a young gymnast, you might have, who knows, you might have gone to this camp, but a lot of times gym camps, summer camps are just in a gym, and they'll put kids in the hotel and they'll bus them back and forth, or they'll be at home and they'll just show up for the camp and go home again. Well, that was the kind of camp that John got invited to. The kids would stay in a hotel. It was a small, I think a 1-week camp at the time. And his teammate, our teammate, Kip Simons from the 96 Olympic team, was supposed to go. And he canceled at the last minute, probably for some very irresponsible reason that he shouldn't have been missing the camp. But he did. And he called John. He said, hey, can you fill in for me at this camp? And John said, sure. John had just retired from gymnastics. And he said, I'll fill in. It was year 2000. And he goes, sure, I'll fill in. He walked into that gym in Knoxville and saw this cute blonde girl across the gym. And immediately it was love at first sight. He said, I'm marrying her. And he did. And they have 4 kids now. But he met her at that camp, spent all the money he made at that camp, taking her out to dinner at the nicest place in Knoxville, borrowed somebody's car, bought all new clothes because all he showed up with was gym clothes. And if he hadn't met her that weekend, more importantly, if Kip, who's highly irresponsible at the time, hadn't canceled at the last minute and John filled in, John went to Met Lacey, he went to go into that camp, and we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now because Flip Fest probably would not have existed if you can believe that. But yeah, so I was in Minnesota. John and I did everything that a non-business person would probably do to prepare to invest in a big summer camp. And I went down, we looked for property. We had a real estate agent in Tennessee that just happened to show us this property in Crossville, and we saw it. The minute we saw it, we're like, this is it. This is the perfect spot to have a summer camp. We had a couple of business partners that helped us kind of get it started, which everyone says don't go into business with friends, and they're right, except for this instance. It worked out amazingly well. They They were more involved in, they actually owned the gym. They bought the gym that Flip Fest started in, that small gym club that John went to. They owned it, became partners with John and I to buy the property in Crossville, build the camp. Without them, we never would have been able to get it off the ground. A few years down the road, they were very much into a lot of other things that didn't have to do with the summer camp, and they needed some financing for their stuff. So we bought them out. It was a very clean break. They were thrilled to move on. We were thrilled to own it, and the rest is history. We've been able to keep it going. But I tell you what, the first year we bought a piece of property that was 150 acres, and it had its own private lake, and it was all woods. There wasn't one building on it, and that's the property that we bought. And we started construction about December of the previous year. We're going to open in June. We were supposed to open June 1st. So we had about 6 months until we had to be ready to go for the first camper. And there wasn't a thing on the whole property. And they had to cut the trees down. They had to put sewer lines in. We had to have a sewer plant. We had to run electrical and water and build the buildings and build roads. The whole camp, from nothing to an operational. We were running around the country going to all these gymnastics meets, selling a camp that didn't exist. And we were planning a camp that we didn't even know how the kids were going to get dropped off and get to their cabins. We had to imagine a car pulling in and going, okay, what happens next? And
how terrifying was that as a business owner?
Absolutely terrifying. And I've never learned so much and worked so hard in a 6-month period in my life. And we did everything from promoting to, the marketing to the planning of the camp. And John's wife at the time was involved, and she was huge part of this whole process too. We were knee deep in mud, digging holes. We were running electrical. We were putting together equipment. We did every single part of it. And it was the most unglamorous thing that you could ever imagine. But it's the same as gymnastics. It was the same thing. It was condensed into 6 months, but you go to the gym and you grind, and you go in there and you fall down, and you get knocked down, and you get hurt. And being an Olympian might look like it's glamorous, but the road there is paved with a lot of potholes and obstacles. But you embrace that and you love that. And it was a terrifying 6 months, but I knew if it only came down to how much John and I could grind and how hard we could work and how strong our will was, if that's all it took, and I think I convinced myself that was all it took, I knew it'd be successful, because I knew we would use every minute of every hour of every day if we had to. And we did. And we had a lot of help from friends too. We had amazing people show up out of the blue, like, hey, I heard you're building the camp. What can I do? And we're like, here's a hammer, go. I mean, we built picnic tables. We had my aunt and uncle were there sleeping in a tent in the woods, and we sprayed straw on grass seed in the 11 o'clock at night. We couldn't even see where it was going. I mean, that was our life for 6 months. And man, I'll tell you what, that first car, as we're running to the dumpster, dumping trash in the dumpster, and that first camper and car pulls in, you're just like, holy cow, it was gratifying and satisfying. But an astute businessman, I would not call myself.
Well, so there are a lot of entrepreneurs or people that are interested in jumping into entrepreneurship that listen to this show. Mm-hmm. So if you had somebody, looking back on that scenario, if you had somebody that was wanting to jump into pursuing their dream or jumping into entrepreneurship, what advice would you give to these people?
Well, I think the first thing is do something that you're really passionate about. And that goes back to what I talked about before. Flip through the catalog of life, until you like something makes you smile. You're like, wow, that'd be cool. And don't be afraid. Don't tell yourself, oh, but I couldn't do that. Just wash that from your mind, because somebody's going to do it, and there's no reason it can't be you. And then I think it's really the essence of everything as far as being successful. Certainly some people are uber talented and gifted, and it just comes naturally and maybe easy, but those are the people also that I don't think have the staying power to do it forever. If it's too easy, as soon as something gets tough, they kind of fall by the wayside. I saw that in gymnastics. So I think just embrace the grind. Embrace, if you're putting all your shells in the middle of the table to start a business, put them all in, and don't be afraid of the small little, 1-bedroom apartment that you live in, and what you drive, embrace it and love it. And you have to be, if you're not happy, and this is funny because the hardest years of camp, we did 1 year before we moved out to that property. John and I did it out of that gym. And that summer and the next summer, the hardest times are the ones you love the most. And those are the ones that give you the gratification and the satisfaction. And you look back on and you're like, oh my gosh, can you believe we did that? And John and I are really good kind of partners because we're not the same person. And John, I'm more of a, how hard is this going to be to do? And John's like, we're going to do it. We got it. It'll work out. And so we kind of, those two kind of mesh together really well. And through those times where, you're just like, you're dirty and you've been working more than half the day. And I mean, more than 12 hours days. And I'm like, man, it was just a few years ago that I was on the floor of the Olympic Games with worldwide live TV watching me. And now here I am with this shovel knee deep in mud going, oh my gosh, it's humbling, but love it and embrace it and embrace the hard parts, and don't be afraid of the hard parts. And when something gets hard or there's an obstacle or there's a setback, keep going. Just keep finding a way and keep grinding. Everybody's going to have those. And the people that have the summer camp or the people that have the business or whatever it is, they all had those too. And they just refuse to stop. And maybe your destination will be exactly what you planned it out to be. Maybe it'll be the exact vision that you started with day one. But if you grind and you work and you never stop and you keep trying to learn and you keep trying to make yourself better, you might not end up right exactly where you thought you were going to be, but you're going to end up somewhere good, somewhere great. And maybe it's a business similar to what you thought. Maybe it's a completely different business. Maybe somebody swoops in and goes, my gosh, look at this guy, a girl, whoever it is, and look at how hard they're grinding and look what they have here. You know what? I want you. And maybe you end up running somebody else's, but whatever it is, hard work and embracing the grind and just never quitting. If you're passionate about something, never ended somewhere bad. It never ended where, oh God, I really regret doing that. And I look back at my gymnastic career. I wanted to win an Olympic medal. That was it. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to stand on that podium and see the American flag go up because I did something to make it go up. And, I'm very proud of my country. And I think we live in the greatest country in the world. Not a perfect place. We all know that. But I was always very proud of it. I wanted to be somebody that brought attention to that country and put that flag up in the rafters because of my gymnastics, or my team's gymnastics. And I didn't do it. We got close many times. We got close. And is it disappointing? Absolutely. Heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Yeah. But do I regret anything? No, because along that road, I became the best gymnast I could be. And I told myself, I go, I don't care how this ends. I care. But the one thing I have control over, and the one thing that will not be in doubt, is John Roethlisberger will be the best gymnast he could possibly have been on the day those Olympic Games take place. And could I have done things different here or there? I did the best with what I had, and I believe that I became as good as I could become. And that was, 5th place in 2000 with my team. And so I look back. Is there disappointment? Absolutely. You can be disappointed, but don't have regret. Regret is a lot harder to live with. And I do have regrets in my life. We all do. But a regret and a disappointment are very different. And if summer camp hadn't worked out, would I have regretted it? No, I'd be disappointed. But man, we busted our butts and we went after it. And thankfully it worked out. Same thing with gymnastics. And I think if you're starting a business, again, take the passion. Don't be afraid to grind and keep grinding and keep working and keep working. And as long as it takes, or as long as it takes to get to somewhere that you're like, you know what, this is pretty sweet, or this is exactly where I wanted to be, or this is close, or this is a great opportunity that's different than what I thought it would be when I started. And I'm thankful for it.
So you said something so crucial. You said that during that process that you guys were grinding it out, you had people step up and help you. So you had to have vocalized some of the challenges that you were going through at that time, because people started coming literally out of the woodworks to help you guys out. So I think that that is so crucial, is being like completely transparent and honest where you're at in your journey, because people will step up and help you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And we do something at camp every week with our staff. We have staff meetings every morning, and we always try to make them. We try to provide some personal growth, whether it's us or some other members of our staff, or some of the visiting coaches that are there just for that week. And one thing we do on every Thursday is we have a goal wall. And the goal wall, you take a note card, and we encourage our staff to write down a goal. And the goals can vary. It can be, I want to learn a handstand this week, or it can be, I want to open my own gymnastic club someday. Or, it can be these, you get all kinds of different goals. But the point of it is that we want them to write it down, and we want them to show everybody else, because that very act, that small act of saying, hey, I want to be an Olympian, it creates an investment on your part. It all of a sudden says, oh man, am I going? And I've been in that situation. I put goals up there, and I'm like, man, am I really prepared to put this goal up? Because now everybody that comes here this summer can see what I want to do. And then they're going to ask me. And then there's this investment. But it gets an investment from the person. But more importantly, to your point, it says to everyone else, hey, this is what I want to do. And you might just have a person that's sitting there going, you know what? You want to open a gymnastic club? Well, let me tell you how it went for me. Or let me tell you what I did. And you all of a sudden have a group of people that are also invested in what you want to do.
You have an accountability team.
It absolutely. And I think it motivates you, because you have this subconscious thing of, I don't want to let them down. And then you also have this group of people that could help you. So, for us, John and I, I mean, it's weird. I don't know how much we actually even specifically reached out to people for help. We'll start questions, and people knew what we were doing, whether it was family or people in the gymnastics world. And they're like, hey, I'm coming down this week. Let me help you. We had a gentleman, Larry Corrigan, who you probably know. Amanda,
I do know Larry Corrigan.
Possibly. He showed up and basically put together our whole gym. Like, he was in the holes and helping us put in, tramp beds and this and that. And he didn't have to do that. But he wanted to be there. And he spent hours and hours. Ginger Rains and Phil Kingsley and Brian Jones and all these different coaches from the area, they stopped by. My family, as I mentioned, showed up like, hey, we're here to help. What can we do? And it was kind of word of mouth of, hey, John and John they're knee deep in mud. They could use some help. And
literally,
without them, it would have been tough to get the job done. I don't know if we could have done it without their help.
Well, and that's the thing. So I want other people to recognize, you don't have to just give money to invest in other people. Sweat equity is totally cool too. Like, it takes literally a village to launch companies at times.
Absolutely. No, 100%. I think that's, in a lot of cases, I think that that people's time is much more valuable than their money. I mean, would you want somebody to hand you the money to open your business, or would you want somebody to teach you how to get the money to open your business? Because if they can teach you how to do it, you don't need them to give you money anymore, right? If you have a good business plan and you have a good idea, that's a huge challenge for a lot of people. How do I get the money? Well, if it's a good plan, somebody's going to want to give you money. So you got to find out how to find those people. So
you've had a uber successful broadcasting career, and I talked to tons.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Well, you have, okay. I've talked to tons of athletes that want to get into broadcasting or public speaking, and they just see, hey, John is, corresponding this or that or the other, and they think it's just, you just walk on there and it just happens magically. So talk a little bit how you got into broadcasting initially.
Well, I was fortunate having been an Olympian and being in the Big Ten, competing for the University of Minnesota. I got my name was kind of on the radar, because they're always trying to find people to fill in. And I think they needed somebody for some meet, and they're like, hey, how about John? And they called me, and I said, sure, I'm there. And so I think it was College Sports Television was the network way back in the early 2000s. And I got in with them, and then NBC has always had a position in their production truck for all their NBC broadcasts that that is a production assistant. It's basically a gymnastics person that sits next to the producer that just is there just in case. It's pretty much the most meaningless job in broadcasting. But I sit next to him, and if he has a question or if there's a score thing or something happens out there, anything related to gymnastics, he'll ask me questions. So I got that job. And I kind of, people knew I wanted to do it. And go back to your note card on the wall that I just talked about and what you were saying about letting people know what you want to do. I think I started, asking more questions and, hey, I'd love to do this and I'd love to do that. And NBC, they're like, hey, we really could use, somebody for this small event. And the big timers didn't want to do it. You can't pay them enough to do this small event. And I'm like, hey, don't forget me, I'll do it. And so I just did every event I could. I was an analyst for men's gymnastics, analyst for women's gymnastics. I had the opportunity to do play-by-play for NBC for a gymnastics event. I was terrible. Somehow I got another opportunity. And that's primarily what I do now for women is I do play-by-play. And I'm with an analyst. Alicia Sacramone is my primary analyst that I work with. But I think, again, it's letting people know that you want to do it. And it's also back to the point of, hey, you got to grind. Just don't be afraid to grind. I have this belief that if you're commentating, whether it's a webcast of your club's meet in your own gym and there's 10 parents watching it, the actual physical job of what you're doing is no different than if you are doing the Olympics and 100 million people are watching. It's the same craft. Just look for opportunities to do your craft. If it's public speaking, go to your grade school, go to any small of church function, anything like that, and practice speaking and keep getting better
small.
Don't be afraid to start small.
Magically just happen. You don't just magically end up on the Olympics. Like you don't end up there. Like you have to grind it out all the way, step by step, take probably free speaking opportunities, anything that you can get an opportunity for.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to that. And just sometimes do big things come right away? Sure, that can happen. But in the meantime, don't just sit around and wait. Just get out there and speak and commentate. Do any event you can. And there's, especially nowadays, I mean, there's a million ways to get broadcasting experience. And heck, you could do it yourself. You can set up a FaceTime Live or whatever in your own room and commentate something that's happening on TV. So don't be afraid to just get out there and grind, like you said, and try different things, do different events, and keep looking for those opportunities.
And I'm going to give a shout out. So you just launched a podcast series with Alicia Sacramone, Out of Bounds. So if you're tuning in, definitely, what channels can they subscribe on?
If you go to our right now, if you go to our Facebook page and it's just Out of Bounds, search Out of Bounds, you can watch it. We do a live show every Thursday at 1:00 right now. And I love live better than recorded because I love mistakes. And I think the human part of it makes it more entertaining. So we do it live. People comment and send questions in. And then you can also watch it later on our Facebook page or our YouTube page. You can also go to our website, outofboundslive.com, and check it out. We talk college gymnastics and we have a good time. We interview a lot of the college coaches and gymnasts, and we have fun.
I'm going to grab it and post it in the comments here in a bit. So I have a question that came in from Kaylee.
Okay.
So she said that she's a huge gymnastics fan looking to pursue a career involving the sport. Her question is any tips on pursuing a gymnastics career if you don't come from a background of being a gymnast? My background is in video production, so maybe a media position would be a good fit. I'm open to other opportunities as well. So gymnastics is one of those things where it's highly technical. You've got to know a lot of different acronyms and lingo. So for her, if she's interested in getting into some type of career in the sport, what would be your recommendations for her?
Gosh, well, first of all, if she wanted to be a coach, and I don't care if she's ever coached before in her life, find a gym near you and go up to the door or maybe call around and find one that's, got fairly respectable in the community and knock on the door and say, hey, I would love to learn to coach. They will take you in. And as long as you're committed, they will invest the time to teach you how to coach. And are you going to be coaching college kids, next week? Absolutely not. You're going to start small and you're going to work your way up. But I tell you what, some of the best coaches in the sport of gymnastics are the ones that aren't necessarily gymnasts or even have ever done gymnastics, but they love the sport and they're passionate about it and they learn it. And they're oftentimes better than former Olympians that are coaches, honestly. So, you know, if you wanted to do that, go for it.
Do you
But
know
also,
Adam Mitchell? So he said, John, thanks for all you do for the sport.
oh yeah, hey Adam, appreciate it. Menominee Falls, yeah, baby. That's where
Adam tunes in every week, and he told me that he was a gymnast as well. So he's a coach, a gym owner, and he was a gymnast as well.
Menominee Falls. That's where my family's from, Wisconsin. So that's awesome. Other parts of the sport. I mean, again, you know, you can go to universities and try to work in sports information. I mean, there's so many social media things that can be done now. Social media managers for athletes or coaches or teams. It's really endless. But a lot of stuff you could find by going to a gym club, and whether it's working in administration or managing a facility or actually getting out on the floor, they're always looking, especially now, looking for good people. And if that's something you're passionate about, I guarantee you they would invest in you.
Yeah, and there's apparel too. Apparel's another great place to get involved as far as gymnastics is concerned, because you don't necessarily have to know the sport, but apparel is a great spot.
And you get to be around the sport, for sure.
You get to be around the sport. So I have some questions. So I want to go back into gymnastics a little bit, and I want to talk about. So there's a lot of people that are parents that listen in on the show, and I'm always encouraging them. Gymnastics is a great sport fundamentally for any other sport that your kids want to get into as they get older. So you have little kiddos. What are your thoughts about gymnastics as a sport for even little kiddos?
I think every kid should do gymnastics. And I'm not saying that because I'm biased about the sport. I think if you have, I would say if you have a child that you would like to be an athlete in something, you definitely should put them into gymnastics. But even if athletics isn't what you think is in the future of your child, put them in gymnastics. There's way too many benefits of it. And it's not what you see when you watch the Olympics or even college. It's not this high flying, daring sport. It's what they do off the couch, over the coffee bag chair in your living room, except they do it in a gym, which is safer. And they learn to run and they jump and they learn they get stronger, they get more flexible, they get tougher because they're going to fall down, they're going to get knocked down. They injuries in sports are, those things happen, and they'll get nicks and bruises, but they'll get back up and they'll try it again. They'll do something that they're scared to do eventually. And they'll be like, wow, I did that. And in my kids, I have 3 boys. They're all in gymnastics. Do I think they're going to be Olympians? No. Is it my goal putting them into gymnastics to be Olympians? No. Now, if they want to, if that's their dream, they can go. I'll support them going for that dream. But I've told them, and I've told my wife, and I agree on this, is they will do gymnastics long enough to get the benefits of doing gymnastics. And I'd love for them to get to the point where they can do a backflip on floor, a giant on the high bar, a circle on the pommel horse, a muscle up on the rings, and you know what? Everything after that, you decide what you want to do. But it's such a good foundational sport. Put your child in gymnastics, whether they're 3 or 4 years old, whether they're 8 or 9 years old. Find a gym that's got a fun, recreational type gymnastic class. Let them try something different, something they would never have gotten to try, something that puts them outside of their comfort zone. They'll be better for it. And my kids do it right now. They just do it once a week, and they want to do it more. Might try to do it twice a week, but they're into other stuff too. They're into soccer, they're into baseball, but it's too good of a sport not to put them in for a few years in their younger age.
What is it like as a parent? So I have a daughter that plays travel soccer, and I have to take back the whole momager thing. Because as an athlete, you're conditioned to push and push and push. Yeah. So there's a lot of people that have asked this question. Well, do you encourage high level sports in young kids? And then also not just that, but how hard do you push these kids? What are your thoughts on parents and them pushing their kids super hard in sports at such a young age?
That's a hard one. That's tough. I think, and I'm dealing with that right now, so I don't have the right answer, but I try to meld a little bit with my upbringing and what my dad, kind of how he handled it, him being an Olympian and kind of that thing where he said, look, you need to find something that you're passionate about. And it can be a variety of different things, but you have to, you're not going to sit around.
Debbie's the best. She said gymnastics always scared the bejesus out of me.
If uncoordinated was a phase. So, I think you got to let them kind of find their own way. But, I tell my kids, I go, there's three things that I want them to be. And the first on the top of the list is kind. And kindness embodies a lot of different things. And the second thing is you got to be tough. I don't care if you're going to try to be an Olympian, but you got to be tough, not just in sports, but in life. You got to start to get knocked down and get back up. And you got to work hard. If you're kind in this world and you're tough and you can work hard, I'm not going to worry about you. And so I kind of approach that same way with sports. My oldest is into baseball and he loves it. And I tell him, I try to teach the correlation between cause and effect of hard work and success. And I keep reminding him of that. And then I kind of just let him kind of find his way. And so, he goes to practice and I want to make sure he's respectful, kind to his coaches, kind to his teammates, listens. I want to make sure, hey, if you get hit by the ball, buddy, if you're not hurt, I'm not going to run over there and just pick you up. You gotta get up and be tough, and you got to work hard. You go from catching balls in the field to batting. You better run to go get your bat. Don't walk and be lazy. And honestly, what do I do beyond that? I can't make him do what he doesn't want to do, other than continually showing them, hey, this, if you love this, and he loves baseball, hey, this is what you got to do. Work harder. Make sure coach tells you to, I always tell him this, coach tells you to do 10, make sure you do 11, just little things like that.
This applies in business too.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. If
coach tells you to do 10, you better do more. And I think that's why athletes can be so uber successful in business, is because you just have, especially really high performance athletes, you just have that grit. If you can apply that in business, it is super powered. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. If you can take that same thing to business, because a lot of times it's hard to go from, like we talked about earlier, a high profile, successful athlete that the world just loves you, to, wow, this cubicle is really small and no one really cares that I'm over here. Yeah. Can you work when no one's watching?
Nailed it. He said sports transition's hard for those who've not had success or more success than others, like Tom Brady and Brett Favre.
Yeah.
Like it's not like there's so many athletes. You're looking at the 1% of the 1% in those categories, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it can be very challenging.
We've got another question popping in, and typically I don't do this style, but I love that people are so engaged with these questions. So Rupa asked, when did you know that you needed to pivot out of professional athletics, and what were the challenges of coming to or arriving at that moment?
Well, it's a little unique for me. We just saw Tom Brady in his playoff game. He lost, and of course everyone's like, is he going to retire? Is he going to retire? For a gymnast, the Olympics are every 4 years, and usually you set your goals based on a 4-year chunk of time. So I went to the 92 Olympics. There was no doubt in my mind I wanted to go back to 96. I was 26 in 96, old at the time, at least people thought. And really my decision was there, that was I going to try for 2000 or was I going to retire? And at that time, I felt like I could still become a better gymnast. I hadn't won that medal I wanted so badly. And so I thought, I want to do this again. And I feel like I can do it again. Fast forward to the year 2000, I tore my ACL at 28 years old, 2 years before the 2000 games. And there's some young guys coming up, and it was harder and harder for me to get better. I felt like I was really getting close to really my max ability. And it was hard for me. That max ability was getting caught up to real quick by a bunch of young guys. So, I felt like I really got the most that I could get out of myself into 2000. Could I have, maybe, hey, one more year, try to make a world championship team and then retire? I could have, but I think I just kind of came to terms with it. For somebody like Tom Brady, they get to decide year by year. All right, I'm going to do one more year. That's a little different than saying I'm going to commit to another Olympic Games. But also, I got to think for someone like him that just came off a great year. I mean, he's in the MVP conversation, right? To say, all right, I'm going to leave when all I got to do is get ready for another season in 6 months and I could do this again. I think that would be harder in a way. And that's not really what I had to decide, but a lot of athletes do. It's like, do I want to go on to another season or not? And that can be tough.
So this is another question that came in, and I'm really curious about your thoughts on that, because you just talked about age. So gymnasts typically peak really, really young. You know, the male gymnasts typically peak a little bit older. But you've got folks, so this is a question from Aaron. What are your thoughts about adult gymnastics and seeing folks like Oksana and Chelsea Memel competing in their 30s and 40s?
I think it's great.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is. I don't know how both of those two athletes you just mentioned, Oksana Chusovitina and Chelsea Memel, I don't quite understand how that happened. And
It's
I don't want to.
superhuman.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't want to like talk down to other sports when I say this, so don't take this the right way. Gymnastics is such a unique and physically demanding sport. Not that others aren't, but in particular, the dynamic power that you have to have. I'll tell you from firsthand experience, it is tough to maintain that dynamic power, especially Chusovitina vaults. And if I was going to pick one event that you would not do at age 40 plus years old, it's vault, because it's such a quick twitch, powerful event where the impacts are very unforgiving. And so to see them doing those exact skills at their age is pretty impressive. But I've always been this person too, that, you know, age is not a speed limit. And we always tie certain things you're able to do in life based on how old you are in life. Tom Brady's throwing that out the window. And I think we can get a lot more out of ourselves than we give ourselves credit for. But I think it has to do with what's between your ears and how much you're willing to continue that uber disciplined lifestyle. You know, I did a pretty disciplined lifestyle through age 30, and I mentally just couldn't keep doing that. You know, going to.
So how often did you practice? So I'm just curious. So when you were training at your peak, and a lot of people don't understand like the whole gymnastics like regimen, what that looks like for people. So when you were training at your peak, how many hours a day, how many days a week were you in the gym training?
Yeah, I typically train 6 hours, 6 days a week rather. My hard days would be right around 6 hours a day. Twice, I'd work out twice in those days. Usually had 2 lighter days where I work out once for about 3 or so hours. And as I got older, I would start to do a little bit on my off days. When I say a little bit, it would be like active rest to try to keep my body kind of moving. But, you know, it's funny because I see, you know, athletes saying, oh, I'm going to take, you know, time off. And in other sports, I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to take a month off and decide what I'm going to do. In gymnastics, like I took a month off once, and it was called retirement. And I just kept not doing
your body,
gymnastics.
like your awareness, like everything just totally gets off kilter if you take any time off. It is so, it's not like just this is gymnastics talk, right? It's not like just getting on the field and playing football. Like it's so dangerous. There's so much that goes into it from a technicality standpoint. And if you're not in the gym 24/7, then your whole game gets thrown off.
Yeah, and I think too, it puts so many different torques and twists and pulls on your joints and your ligaments. I mean, they get pulled and pushed in directions that I think everyone would admit you don't normally get pushed and pulled in. And your body gets used to that. Like your joints and ligaments get flexible and pliable, and they get strengthened in certain ways. And your body becomes, you know, physically fit to do gymnastics. And you stop doing it, your body's like, oh, this is nice. And it kind of goes back to a tighter version of itself, and to just jump back into the sport. That's why I think what Chelsea's doing, coming back to the sport, is so
amazing.
hard. And that's why you don't see a lot of comebacks. You don't see a lot of gymnasts that take a year or two off, although we've seen some in recent years, and then all of a sudden come back. I think I'm guessing they kept their body in the gym a little bit to keep that kind of that physical fitness, but it's a hard sport to come back to. And really, I didn't take time off more than a few days through at least the last decade of my career. In fact, Menominee Falls came up with Adam in Menominee Falls. I would go to visit my grandparents in Menominee Falls, and I'd find a gym in the area. I'm like, all right, I'm going to be there for 4 days. I got to go work out, So I'd go to LaFleur's, or I'd go to Salto or something, and I'd go in there and I'd do a little workout, and I do that a couple times and mentally, I'm like, I can't. I just want to go and have a spring break. I never had a spring break ever until I was 31 or 2 years old. And
gymnastics is year
that's part
round.
of
Like,
it.
yes, you see the competitions in a season, but you train year round. Like what
Oh
people
yeah,
see on TV is like a very small piece of the entire equation. You
yeah,
train all
yep.
year. Like you don't take a summer off. It doesn't
No,
work.
there's no off season. Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this conversation, I want to kind of tie it back to the business side. So when you took lessons learned in your gymnastics career and applied them to the business sense, what are some tips or tricks that you could give to other people aside from the grit? We've got the grit, but aside from that, what are some tips and tricks that you would give to people to apply how like your athletic career into business?
I think not being afraid to ask people for help or ask questions, reaching out to the community. I had mentioned earlier, John and I have gotten into real estate in Knoxville, and that's been a lot of fun and a learning experience. So some of the stuff that we've been doing, but a big part of it, and John's really good at this. He's not afraid to pick up the phone and be like, "Well, you know what? I'm going to call so and so and ask them." And I'm always like, "Really? You're going to call and ask them?" But it's amazing the knowledge that people are willing to share, and even if technically, you're calling another real estate developer and you're a real estate developer, you're competing against each other, right? But it's amazing how, if you just pick up the phone and you just start asking questions and you go to the experts or who you think are the experts, even if they don't have the answer, they might have somebody who does. And so keep asking questions. You run into a roadblock. Yeah, the grinding, you got to keep grinding. But part of that grinding is I'm going to find the answer to this. Maybe I don't have it, but I'm going to keep asking questions until, somebody can get me back on that road and heading towards my goal or my dream, whatever that might be.
It's like being relentless with your own success.
Yep, absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm totally fangirling. We know a lot of similar people. Larry Corgan, I do know. How can people follow your journey, and what are some things maybe that you've got going on that you'd like to have other people follow?
Oh gosh. Follow my journey. I mean, I'm on social media, but I'm not very exciting. So I don't know if you want to follow that, to be honest with you. If people want to check out our camp website, it's flipfest.com. We do some cheerleading now. We have gymnastics. We also have a ninja camp for those siblings who aren't gymnasts that want to come to camp with their siblings. We do a ninja camp like American Ninja Warrior for kids. So that's fun. It's called Ninja Fest. So check those out. Love to have your kids come see us and enjoy the summer with us. Check us out on Out of Bounds Live. We have fun. If you're into college gymnastics, we have a great time. So yeah, I guess that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining in on the conversation today. You're the first male gymnast that I've had. I think the first gymnast period on the show.
Nice.
So that's exciting.
I'm very proud.
And we shout out to all parents, get your kids in gymnastics.
Do it. You won't regret it.
But thank you for joining. To everybody listening, thank you for continuing to follow the journey of Sports to Suits, where we highlight former athletes on a weekly basis that are doing some amazing things in the business community. I just announced today that I went ahead and got it on Apple Podcasts. So if you're looking for the audio side, definitely go subscribe, and we'll see you again next week.